people who spoke Cantonese as a lingua franca. They had different L1s, Hakka speaker or Minnan Yu. So they very often were multilinguals. They would speak their mother tongue, like Hakka, the lingua franca of the Chinese community, Cantonese. They learned Vietnamese in school, and they learn Chinese literacy in either tutoring or in a bilingual school situation. So obviously these are very different, and it's completely predictable that they would learn Chinese even faster than the monolingual group. That's not surprising, of course, and they already knew how to read and write Chinese when they came to Taipei. But the most interesting was their testimony regarding a system to proficiency, or a system to ability, and that is metacognition and metalinguistic awareness of the relationship between Cantonese and Mandarin in their learning of literacy, learning the characters in Chinese. And this was very surprising to us because it was almost universal, their very accurate description about how they explained to us that even as second language learners of Mandarin, and they still had not, even before they had mastered Mandarin, they were able to explain to us why, even in their second language, that Mandarin has a closer alignment with the Chinese characters. This is a remarkable observation for a non-linguist. These were people who had not, on the average, not passed 6th grade. But because of their extensive early experience with two literacies, Vietnamese literacy and Chinese literacy in Vietnam, and their experience with 3 or 4 languages, they were able to catapult their metacognition ability, which is system 2, okay? It's a system 2 ability to explain aspects of bilingualism in the Chinese communities, where two languages like Cantonese and Mandarin coexist, and they compared literacy learning in Cantonese, for example, being more focused on memorization and copying, and Mandarin being closer to the actual Chinese characters. So therefore, they were able to use pinyin and focus more on the actual phonology of their second language as it is related to literacy. So this is another example of how System 1 and System 2 permeate all kinds of examples of language learning. I'm going to end off with this one example. The syntax of phrases of de. This is a very interesting grammatical pattern in Chinese, and for children learning their L1, it is quite remarkable. It is quite remarkable because they master what must be a very abstract and very complex, especially abstract rule or sets of rules for how this function word forms grammatical phrases in Chinese. They require no instruction from their parents about what this rule is. Their parents don't know what the rule is unless they're linguists, okay? And they learn it perfectly by the age of 6. Whereas second language learners of Chinese have great difficulty with it. And here's an example.
Hi, Professor Francis. Hi, Professor Francis. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I'm going to cut it right
time is
over
almost up. Yeah.
I will just leave you with this slide here, and you can just look at it.
Sorry. Yeah,
no, okay, I'm sorry. I went all the way to 30 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Okay, Francis. Yeah. Have you finished, Dr. Francis? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
We'll pass it off to the next speaker.
Okay, Professor Francis. Many thanks for your insightful speech.
Thank you for your patience.
It's really interesting and illuminating. Yeah. Professor Francis' speech focused on domain-specific and domain general aspects of language development. Yeah, Dr. Francis and his colleagues applied System 1 and System 2 to the study of aspects of bilingualism, second language learning, and literacy learning involving 2 or more languages. Yeah. Okay. I'm sure all of us have benefited a lot from Professor Francis' illuminating speech. Yeah, due to time limit. Also, sorry to say, I'm sorry we do not have time for questions and further inquiries. If you have any questions or inquiries, please contact Dr. Francis via email later. Yeah, once again, let's thank Professor Francis for his wonderful, insightful speech. Yeah. Now, next, Professor Ma Lihong will be the host for the 4th plenary address. Yeah, Ma Lihong from University of Science and Technology, Beijing. Yeah. Professor Ma, are you present now?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Professor Fan. Okay.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. This is Ma Lihong from USTB. Okay, I will host for this session. Okay, we are very honored to have Professor Esther Giva from the University of Toronto. So let me briefly introduce Professor Giva. Professor Giva's research covers 3 fields. First, the developmental issues and best practices concerning language and literacy skills in children from various immigrant and minority backgrounds, and also in ethnically and linguistically marginalized groups. Second, he focuses on the language and literacy skills in typically developing learners and learners with learning difficulties. And third, he focuses on the cross-cultural perspective on psychological difficulties. She has published extensively in these areas and also has served on advisory policy and review committees in the US and Canada concerned with language and literacy development in ethnically and linguistically diverse children. Today, her topic is a comparison of the profiles and predictors of reading comprehension in elementary school English language learners and their monolingual peers. So now let's welcome Professor Giva. Professor Giva, are you okay?
I'm okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I apologize. I had some technical problems today, so my screen doesn't look the way it's supposed to be, but at least I have it for the first slide. Yeah, at least I've managed to get, with some help from various people, to get this going. So thank you for the organizers of this conference, and it's a real privilege to follow in the steps of Jeff Grun and Francis, and in a way, I wish I could just continue listening to the 2 of you rather than do my talk, but I guess I should move on. So let's get going. So this is just acknowledging where I'm coming from in Canada and all the various affiliations. So I sort of chose to do, rather than doing a big overview, to focus on 1 or 2 studies that address the kinds of questions that were introduced about my interest in the introduction. So let's get going. So in general, my research has focused over the years, and there are different times when I focus on different things, on clinical assessment and instructional issues related to issues such as that one of my former colleagues at OISE at the University of Toronto, Jim Cummins, was talking a lot about over-identification of children who may have a learning problem, who as having a problem, whereas in fact they may be just kids who are learning a second language and they're kids of immigrants and so forth. So that was sort of on the one extreme, and the other extreme, or the other side was actually finding that we reported on over 20 years ago, that we found that among ELL kids, in fact, that's directly related to the points that Jeff was talking about earlier, that we actually found that second language learners and kids of immigrants were less likely to be identified as having a learning disability such as dyslexia or language disorder. So there's this kind of two extremes. And when I kind of moved into this area, I would try to, with my research, to figure out if we can do a better job of avoiding over and under identification. And definitely the progress that has been made since then with the genetic research of the kind that Jeff talked about is I think, a very promising way of minimizing over and under identification if the system is responsive enough. So in terms of a general kind of a research agenda of the years, what I did in my research on involving kids who come from various second language backgrounds, mostly kids of immigrants, was to see what does normal development look like in terms of language and various word reading skills, spelling skills, phonological awareness, and so on. What does it look like when it's normal, what it's typical, what aspects of these components are modulated by language typology, by different writing systems, and then to look, and that's where the main part of my presentation today will be, study factors that explain development and whether they are whether we can understand them in terms of language typologies, cognition and context. And of course, from a clinical perspective, the idea is that we should do a better job of identifying kids who as having some kind of a learning problem, and then they should get the right treatment, as mentioned by my predecessors today. So we're all saying the same thing. So moving more specifically now to the study that I'm going to be sharing with you today, which is part of a larger project. Clearly, we all know that reading comprehension is fundamental to academic success. And one of the things that we see when we look, for instance, at post-secondary attainment, that it may depend on having good reading skills. So I'm talking about the ELLs. By the way, ELLs means English language learners, which is one of the terms being used in North America. And I will not get now into the politics of the different terminology. I don't think it's relevant to my talk today. So when we look at the ELLs and we ask questions such as who is doing well in the university, there may be issues related to mental health and career trajectories and post-secondary attainment.
Professor Diva, I'm sorry for interrupting you. We cannot see your PPT. Would you please share?
Thank you for telling me.
Yeah.
Okay, you missed all the beautiful pictures at the beginning, but that's okay. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but also we cannot see any PPT now.
You don't? How about now?
No, sorry.
Uh-oh. In that case, I don't know what to do. I thought we solved the problem.
You can continue, please, if you cannot share it well. So please continue.
I spent the whole day dealing with this technical problem. Okay, so I will, you will have to use your imagination and we'll wing it, I guess. Okay, that's too bad. The simple view of reading is one of the theoretical frameworks that's used quite a bit, and for good reason. And when we look at trying to understand what are the components that contribute to reading comprehension? And what it says basically is that, and this of course it's based on a lot of research, is that to comprehend well, you have to have good decoding word recognition skills, and one has to have good language comprehension skills. So that those two combined together, and if individuals have good decoding word recognition skills, if they have good language skills, then they will be comprehending well. Another framework that is slightly different, and Francis actually referred to it, is the lexical quality hypothesis, which the way I see it, complements the simple view of reading, and it focuses on word reading processes and the idea that in order to read well, one has to have good orthographic skills, good phonological skills, and good lexical skills, and they all should work together. And again, this framework is supported by a lot of research with individuals at different age groups. So in this, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, in the research that we have conducted over the years, we have followed children for a number of years to see how they change in their behaviors over time. I have all these beautiful pictures to show you. It's really frustrating that you cannot see them. Okay, so what we have shown in a study that we published about 3-4 years ago is we looked at kids who are in grade 4, and they and we had ELL kids, so these are kids who come from various home language backgrounds, not English, and they all go to school where they study English, and we compared them with their peers who are sitting in the same classrooms, who are monolinguals, who speak English at home from birth, and the parents speak English. And the question that we asked in that particular project was whether we can tease apart who are the kids how can we understand kids who do well on comprehension and those who don't do well, and whether the underlying processes are similar, and the profiles that that emerge are similar. So, and what we found was that, and this is a paper that was published about, as I said, 3 years ago in Journal of Learning Disabilities. What we found was that if we look at processes such as phonological awareness, orthographic processes, memory, listening comprehension, reading comprehension, and we look at the clusters that are formed, we see that there are basically 2 clusters that are formed among the monolingual kids. One cluster involves those kids who are above the mean, and they do well on phonological awareness. They do well on orthographic processes or things such as spelling. Do well on language skills and reading comprehension. So this is kind of cluster that goes together. And the other cluster is of children who don't do well, who are monolinguals. And that in that cluster we see kids, some kids who have phonological awareness problems, others who have or various spelling problems. They also are lower than their kids who are doing well in terms of their listening comprehension and reading comprehension. So we kind of get these 2 profiles, a profile that's below the mean and a profile that's above the mean among the monolinguals. And then when we looked at the ELL kids and we analyzed them separately, so we analyze the data separately, so we compare them to themselves, we find a similar profile among the ELLs as well. In other words, we found that when we compare, let's say that we take all the kids who are in grade 4 who are ELLs, and we look to see the clusters, we find again the 2 clusters emerge. And one of them is of what we call poor comprehenders. And these kids who are poor comprehenders, who are second language learners, they have problems with phonological awareness. They have problems with orthographic processing, so things such as spelling. They have problems with decoding. They also have their language comprehension is lower, and their reading comprehension is lower. And likewise, within the ELL group, so I want to emphasize we compare ELLs to ELLs, and we compare monolinguals to monolinguals. When we look at the ELLs, again, we find these two profiles, one of those who are doing well in comparison to other ELLs, and the ones who don't do well. And they are the ones where all these elements of the lexical quality hypothesis, for instance, emerge, such as orthographic knowledge, phonological skills, and lexical skills. So basically, we find similar patterns, but the point is that rather than comparing the ELLs to the monolinguals and analyzing together, we analyze them separately. So what the focus of my presentation today is on follow-up studies where we ask questions such as, is the lexical quality hypothesis supported at different developmental time points for the ELLs? And which components of language comprehension are more important for reading comprehension? So what I'm doing in the next slide, and nobody can see, unfortunately, just describe a little bit of methodology, and hopefully you will be able to remember at least some of it. So we had 14 schools in various areas of Toronto. Altogether, we had 538 kids who were ELLs and a slightly lower number of monolinguals. And the languages that were represented were 19 different languages. Toronto is a hub for immigrants who come from different parts of the world. And so in our sample of ELLs, we had kids who spoke a variety of languages, 19 of them to be precise. The majority of the children who participated in this project were actually born in Canada, and many of them lived in areas of the city that are considered to be low SES to middle to low SES neighborhoods. So what I'm going to share with you, again, as in the previous point study that I just briefly mentioned, was that we use a longitudinal framework. And what we did was basically for 10 years, for 6 years, every year we recruited an additional cohort of kids in grade 1. So, and we followed them for 6 years. So we have 6 cohorts, and we followed them for 6 years. So it takes, as you can imagine, a long time to collect the data. And so we tested those kids every year from grade 1 to grade 6. And we looked at reading, various aspects of reading. We looked at different components of language. We looked at various aspects of cognitive processing. And as I said, it's longitudinal. So what we can do is see how change occurs over time, and we can also see with our clusters that separate the data, so they're not all in the middle. That within the ELLs you see different clusters, and I'll show you examples of that. Well, I will talk to you about it in a moment. So in the first study, longitudinal study, we looked at the contribution of language comprehension skills to reading comprehension in monolingual and ELL kids. And the questions that we asked were, how do children's vocabulary, listening comprehension, and syntax and their development longitudinally relate to reading comprehension development? So we have 3 different ways of looking at language. We look at vocabulary, we look at listening comprehension, and we also ask the kids to perform some syntactic tasks, which of course they get harder and harder, as all these tests do. And so the question when we're asking then is, what are the sources of variation in reading comprehension that we observe in this longitudinal sample? Which aspects of language comprehension predict reading comprehension? And is there a difference between patterns that emerge when the kids are young, grades 1 to 3, versus in grades 4, 5, 6, where they are expected to engage in a more serious way in academic learning from reading? And of course, the other question which we always ask is, what's the difference between monolingual and ELL kids? So the measures that I will skip because I guess I'm relying on your memory for all these measures. I will not describe all the measures. I just say that we had a measure of nonverbal ability that we used. We used phonological awareness, working memory, and these were the control variables in our analysis. In terms of language, we had vocabulary, we had a task of listening comprehension, we had a syntactic awareness task, and of course, all the children also do the standardized reading comprehension task. So the first part of the results, we're talking about multi-level modeling. So what we look at is how change in reading comprehension can be described in terms of function of time. Is the growth linear or curvilinear? We look at a random intercepts model for both the ELLs and the monolinguals in grades 1 to 3 versus 4-6. And with the reading comprehension of participants within each language group, we should point out, actually grew at a similar rate. So both the monolinguals and the ELLs grew at a similar rate, which is an important thing to do. And of course, many of them are sitting in the same classrooms. The other thing that we then did was we looked to see, and this is where we use multi-level models, and I have a beautiful graph that you cannot see about this. What we saw though is that among the ELL kids in grade 1, what predicted reading comprehension was listening comprehension, syntactic awareness, vocabulary, and working memory. So all these measures predicted reading comprehension among the ELLs. And among the EL1s, on the other hand, only 2 of those measures, listening comprehension and syntactic awareness, predicted, but not vocabulary. So right away, one of the things that we need to think about is how the processes are different from the monolinguals and the ELLs, that you cannot assume that the same battery predicts development over time in the same way for monolinguals and the ELLs. So this was for the EL1s. For the ELLs, what we found, and by now I'm talking about grade 4 kids. So these are the same children, right? But now they're in grade 4. And we are asking what predicts their reading comprehension. And I think this is a key finding of this study was that for ELLs, what we find that, again, nonverbal ability always explains some variance. Working memory is a significant predictor. And as are phonological awareness and 2 measures of language, listening comprehension and syntactic knowledge. All of these contribute to their ability to predict who will be a good comprehender and a poor comprehender when the kids are ELLs. Among the monolingual kids, we found that the only 2 variables that predicted reading comprehension grade 4 significantly were nonverbal ability and vocabulary. So just kind of a quick summary. So does language predict reading comprehension? Yes, but what we see is that among the ELLs, more aspects of language comprehension are significant predictors of reading comprehension, whereas among the monolinguals, vocabulary does most of the job. And we can talk about it later about what it all means. We then did a regression analysis to see what are, which again, I have a table here, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details given that you cannot see the table, but I would like to just highlight one thing that, that the early predictors of later reading comprehension are not identical for the monolinguals and the ELL kids. So that for the monolinguals, listening comprehension is not significant. The main variable that carries the variance is vocabulary, and that is also true in grades 2 and in grade 3. On the other hand, when we look at the ELL kids, so sitting in the same classroom and we ask what predicts their reading comprehension, we see that for these little kids who are learning English, and it relates to what Francis was talking about earlier about the system 1 and system 2. is that we see that vocabulary predicts and syntactic awareness predicts and listening comprehension predicts, and each of them predict additional variants. So they're not interchangeable, okay? So really what it is, and I think it really kind of ties in nicely, I believe, with what Francis was talking about, was that they're learning the language. So they're acquiring a variety of different skills that all are under this bundle of language, and there's variance in each of them, and they all add up together to explain who's going to be a good comprehender, who's not going to be, or who's going to be a poor comprehender. So there's a difference. So does language predict reading comprehension? Yes, but the components are different for kids who are sitting in the same classroom, whether they're monolinguals or ELLs, in terms of what is going on in terms of their language acquisition and individual differences in the language acquisition and how it relates to reading comprehension. So I have, again, a equally complex table here for the prediction in grades 5 and 6. And again, I'll try to summarize it since you cannot see the graph. Again, for the monolingual kids, vocabulary carries all the variants in our research and our data. So if you want to predict reading comprehension for ELLs in grades 5 and 6, just test them on the vocabulary and it will explain most of the variants. On the other hand, again, for the ELLs, it's vocabulary, it's syntactic knowledge, and listening comprehension. Each of those picks up on additional variant that is not picked up by the other variables. So they complement each other, and we need to add them up. So the summary then of the key points of the study is that the individuals maintained their relative position to peers on reading comprehension over time. So if somebody, and again, I think it follows with things that, for instance, Jeff talked about earlier today in terms of the genetic components. So if you have some the individual differences among children and those who over and above the fact that they're second language learners, if they have problems, if they have lower ability, if they have lower memory, if they are lower at acquiring language, that continues to carry over time, whereas those who are privileged to have better working memory, better ability to acquire language, then their growth is steeper, and they are better comprehenders as well. So this is kind of the summary of study one. Maybe one more thing I should say, that language comprehension variables explain significant variability in reading comprehension, both for L1s and L2s. But it's just what are the variables that predict are different between the L1 and L2. They're not identical. So now I'm going to switch to the second study. And here the focus is on investigating the lexical quality hypotheses in monolinguals and ELLs, and we have used a longitudinal approach. Okay. So in terms of the measures that we had for the lexical quality hypotheses, we had the phonological awareness. So we had an auditory analysis skills task, which I think most researchers in this domain use. And my slide just moved, sorry. Oh, here we go.
I'm a little bit sorry, Professor. Of course, our time is so limited, so we have to stop here. Thank you again. Just now, Professor gave us two interesting research. The first
but you stop in the middle of a sentence.
Okay.
Okay, so please let me. Yeah,
please. Okay.
Okay. So the key points of study 2 are the support the lexical quality hypotheses at different developmental time points, and that the profiles of monolinguals and ELLs are similar but not identical. And the profiles are highly stable over time for both monolinguals and more nuanced for the ELLs. Okay, that's my summary. Now you can continue.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Professor Giva. Okay, your speech is fantastic, but it's a little bit pathetic. We cannot see your PPT. Okay, Professor Giva gives us two research. The first one focuses on the contribution of different language skills to the reading comprehension of English language learners and the English-speaking monolingual students. in primary and middle school. And also the second research determined the reading and language profiles linked with the English language learners and English speaking monolingual students at different time points. Of course, our time is limited, so we cannot have interaction. I'm so sorry, Professor Giva, we have to move to the next keynote speaker, okay? So now the next keynote speaker today is Professor Wang Chuang. Okay, it's my great honor to introduce Professor Wang. He is a distinguished professor and dean of the Faculty of Education at the University of Macau. His expertise includes educational research design, applied statistics, program evaluation, and English language learners' self-efficacy and self-regulation. He has published 8 books, 21 book chapters, 136 peer-reviewed journal articles. And also, Professor Wang has served as the editor-in-chief of many peer-reviewed journals. And also, he is the president of the Chinese American Educational Research and Development Association. Today, Professor Wang's topic is a relation between self-efficacy beliefs, self-regulated learning strategies, and English language proficiency. That is the summary of 3 meta-analysis studies. So now let's welcome Professor Wang Chuang. Okay, okay, Professor Wang?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Ma. Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay, so please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, are you able to see my screen? Hello?
Yeah, yes, clearly.
Okay,
yeah,
great, thank you. Thank you, I'm going to start. Yeah, it's my great honor to speak at this conference. I want to appreciate my, thank you very much for inviting me to speak here. Today, I'm going to talk about the relationship between self-efficacy beliefs, self-regulated learning strategies, and English language proficiency. It's a summary of the 3 meta-analyses that I have conducted recently. I'm going to give the guidelines of my presentation. I'm going to talk about the rationale of the studies first, and followed by the methods I used in these studies, and then the results of the 3 studies, and then I'll talk about the implications. I provide references in the end of the presentation. So the rationale of the study. So why I'm interested in these studies. As Professor Ma has introduced, I've been working on these topics for more than 20 years. I'm always interested in the psychological effects, such as self-efficacy beliefs, and also motivation and persistence in studying English as a foreign language, or the second language. So I have done some research and read some literatures. I found that the previous literature suggests that the relationship between self-efficacy beliefs and English language proficiency are always significant. So I want to think about what are the moderators of these relationships. And also I want to see if there's a summary, so we can see if there's so many studies conducted in this field, can we make a conclusion so that we can move on and we can do something else. So that's why I want to do these studies. And also I paid attention to the importance of writing. Of course, reading, writing, listening, speaking are all important, but writing seems to be more challenging for English as a foreign language learners. So that's why I put more emphasis on writing. Also, as we mentioned that I study English as a foreign language in China, but my children study English as a second language in the US. That's why I wonder whether there's a difference in studying English as a first language or in studying English as a second language or as a foreign language. So I also included the moderator of English as a first language or English as a second language. And I also became interested in self-regulated strategy development as SRSD. So I'm going to talk more about that in later slides, and then identify some research gaps and research aim and research questions. So first of all, I'm going to go quickly on the literature review. I'm sure that most of you are very familiar with the literature. So you can see that these literature have been done with with me and my colleagues and some of my former students, and we worked together. And also I collected some literature. We found some relationships between self-efficacy beliefs and English language proficiency in many countries, in European countries, Asian countries. These are our summaries. And then I found that the magnitude of the relationship between self-efficacy and English language proficiency also varies across tasks and contexts. So these have been established by previous, very respectable scholars in the field, like Mimi Bang and Klassen. And also, we found that self-efficacy was correlated with learning strategies. And these are conducted by me and my colleagues. So the importance of writing, there's no doubt that English writing is essential for students to be successful in academics, in profession and career development, and also in the society. One of the things that I'm sure that most of you noticed that it's a time for application to universities. I receive a lot of requests about students, how they can improve their essays. As you know, many students want to apply to Ivy League universities in the US, and essay writing is very, very important. So they look at SAT scores, but essay writing is also very important and quite challenging for students to write an essay for both first language learners and for second language or foreign language learners. And unfortunately, these statistics in the US shows that 74% of the students in grade 8 and 73% of the students in grade 12 in the US performed at or below the basic level in writing in 2021. So I don't have a more recent statistics, but it shows that writing was important, but students were not doing well in writing. But why? I think probably because writing is a complex cognitive process, and writing needs extensive self-regulation of a flexible, goal-directed or problem-solving activity. So that's why I echo Harry's word. I think that writing is a complex process. That's why I'm more interested in writing. And then I think that as a teacher, we need to design and implement an instruction that focuses on knowledge and skills in self-regulation in writing. For example, setting goals, making plans, self-monitoring, and self-evaluation. I was interested in self-regulation because when I was pursuing my doctorate degree in Ohio State University, my advisor introduced me to this concept. I found that it was fascinating, and then I pursued in this direction until now. I'm still doing research in this field. So let's look at the self-regulation model in writing. So this model was developed by Zimmerman and Rastenberg. So it consists of three aspects, like a person, environment, and behavior. Of course, it originally comes from Bandura's social cognitive theory. It shows the process and feedback reciprocal relationship between these three constructs. I'm not going to elaborate more on that. And then the SRSD, this strategy is a criterion-based teaching approach. They incorporate explicit and systematic instruction writing strategies, knowledge or skills, and self-regulation procedures into the writing. There are 6 stages. So you can see that this is how SRSD was implemented in the classroom. The previous research has shown that effects of SRSD on writing are very good. So they can produce longer, persuasive, and informative writings. They can provide more positive effects on writing elements, and they can also improve writing quality. However, there are a few meta-analyses on SRSD with regular students. Of course, Graham and his colleague have done some research and meta-analysis about the effects with students in regular classes, but those were more than a decade ago. The SISD was originally developed for students with learning disabilities or have other special needs. So the gap was that SISD was not given much discussion in the previous studies, and the factors that moderate the effect of SISD on writing were not examined. So I'm more interested in the moderators of the effect. So that's why we conducted 3 meta-analyses. So my research question for study 1 was that what is the average effect size of the relationship between self-advocacy beliefs and language proficiency? So that is like a summary. So we have done so many studies. Then can we summarize it? What is the average effect size? Is it large, small, or medium? So the second research question is, to what extent is the effect size moderated by language domain, analytical procedure, publication type, publication period, learner level, and cultural context, etc. So the research questions for study 2 is what is the magnitude of the relationship between writing self-advocacy and writing proficiency for first and second language writers in English? And then how does this, writing in English as the first language or second language moderate the relationship? So basically, they're similar. So first question is a summary, and the second question examines the moderators. And the third study is about the effect of SISD. So again, the first question is a summary. So what is the effect? So, and then the second question was the moderators. So how these moderates the effect, like the outcome features, methodological features, learner features, publication features, etc. So all these 3 studies share something in common. They're just focused on different fields or specific topics. So the method, we did a meta-analysis. We use inclusion, exclusion criterion. We search items for strategies, literature screening, data coding, and effect size extraction, and data analysis. So you can see that these are the inclusion and exclusion criterion for study 3. Of course, we have that for all 3 different studies. For the sake of time, I'm not going to present the details for each of the study. I'm going to focus more on the study 3, which I did with my former doctoral students. This one is the most recent one, so we'll focus on this one. So the inclusion criterion, there has to be a true or quasi experimental design. It has at least 1 outcome variable assessing students' writing achievement, and they have to apply SISD instruction or intervention. The study was conducted in regular schools, and then the study was written in English. The study was written and published after 2012, and that's because Graham has done the meta-analysis in 2012. We don't want to repeat what he has done. And then the study was a scholarly, peer-reviewed journal article or dissertation or thesis. And then the study has reported effect sizes, or they provide data that help us to calculate the effect sizes. So these are the inclusion and exclusion criteria. Of course, we searched these databases. We used the terms. We use a variety of terms so that we don't miss anything. Because if you just use the keywords like writing, you might miss some articles that use written or write or composition, etc. So that's why we think of all possible key terms we can use. We also use backward search. That means we look at the reference list of the studies that we have collected and see if we have missed anything. And we used both electronic and manual searches, which first round, we ended up with 1,826 studies. And after duplicate checking, because some databases yielded the same articles, so we ended up with 1,073 studies. So this is the Prisma diagram, so that it shows how we narrow it down through the steps for first phase screening, second phase screening. So of course, my former student, I had done a lot of work on that. So we ended up with a final sample of 22. You can see that we started with the more than 1,000, and then we ended up with only 22 samples. So the data coding, we look at the sections like outcome features, methodological features, learner features, effect size, statistics, and of course we coded the data as study ID, author, journal, publication type, a year of publication. The outcome features were coded as writing genres, writing outcome measures, measure types. Methodological features, we look at the research design, partial assignment, random assignment or not random assignment, intervention duration, long or short. Learner features, we look at sample size, learner level, and the country where the study was conducted. And effect sizes were either reported by a primary study or calculated by ourselves. So since each study reported different type of effect sizes, we have to convert the effect size into HSG, so that we could put them as a uniform of the effect size. This is how we convert them. We also look at the publication bias. We include both journal articles and dissertations, and to minimize the probability of publication bias, because most studies have shown that journal articles turned out to report studies with more statistically significant results. Many dissertations or theses were not published because their results were not statistically significant or the effect sizes were too small. So we also use the funnel plot to provide evidence for the publication bias. We also use the classic fail-safe plan to monitor the publication bias. So the results of study 1 is that we look at the relationship between self-efficacy and language proficiency. That is the general language proficiency. So we use the 493 effect sizes from 74 studies. So we found that the effect size was, ranged from small to medium. And then the effect size reported in studying with East Asian students were larger than those with students in Western countries. And another important finding is that the zero-order correlations inflated the effect sizes. So we encourage the use of multi-level data analysis, that is hierarchical linear model for meta analysis. So this echoes the previous speakers' recommendation as well. And then the study 2, we used the 565 effect sizes from 76 studies, and we found the effect size was medium for the relationship between writing self-efficacy and achievement, and for both IELTS1 and IELTS2 writers. Well, that's why, remember one of the moderators was IELTS1 or IELTS2 writers. We found that the effect sizes were larger with IELTS2 writers than with IELTS1 writers. What that means, it means that the self-efficacy belief is more important for second language writers than for first language writers. And then the statistical procedure does moderate the effect size estimates. So that means when people conduct studies, they have to be cautious in choosing the statistical procedures. So multi-level models are highly recommended than the traditional analysis of variance of simple regression or correlations. And study 3 results are like we show the characteristic of primary studies and overall effects as heterogeneity and moderate analysis. So I'm going to go that very quickly. So we used the 43 effect sizes from 22 primary studies. We found that persuasive writing, narrative writing, expository writing, and writing quality, writing measures, education level, intervention duration. These are the descriptives of the studies. And then these are the overall effect sizes. So we reviewed a large and significant effect sizes. So that means the effect of SRSD was significant. when we look at the impact of SRSD. And then we also look at the moderators. We found that outcome features, they are statistically significant, and methodical features also significant, learner features also significant, and publication features are also significant. So what is not significant is like writing genres did not moderate the effect size. And as I mentioned, that effect sizes estimated from studies without random assignment were not significantly different from those estimated with random assignment. So that is not a significant moderator. And SRD also had a significant effect on writing performance for both older and younger learners. That means learner level was not moderating the effects of SRSD. And publication type was a strong moderator of effect size, which is not surprising. It says that the journal effect sizes reported in journal articles, they are significantly larger than those estimated by dissertations or thesis. So what are the implications of our studies? First of all, we think SRSD is effective in improving writing outcomes and can be implemented in the context of various writing genres. So it does not matter which genres you are writing, SRSD is effective. And SRSD is also effective intervention across learner levels. That means primary, middle school, secondary, or even college, and also across countries. So in many countries, we can also implement SRSD in the classroom. And SRSD had a larger effect size on writing elements and quality compared with writing length. That means, length is also important, but not as important as elements of the writing quality. So as far as SRD was concerned, what is more important, I would like to share with the audience is that published journal articles tend to report statistically significantly larger effect sizes than unpublished dissertations. So of course, I serve as a journal editor as well, and I have been supervising many students. We have had a lot of conversations like that. When students run the data, they did not find a statistically significant difference or relationship. And they were very worried. They said, well, how can I publish that? Well, of course, the bias is there, but I think that we should be loyal, be faithful to the data. So, whatever your results are, you have to present it and seek publications, because that can reveal, get us closer to the truth. We never know the truth, but that'll help us get closer to the truth. If we have bias in selecting, results for publication, then the bias are going to be stronger. Another important message I want to share is that since we have done so many meta-analysis and also many survey studies have been conducted, the relationship between self-advocacy, self-regulation, and academic achievement have already been there. I don't think there's anything new if you continue to do survey studies like that. So I would encourage future researchers to include interventions and longitudinal studies, to examine the causal effects of self-advocacy and self-regulation. So of course, people always argue, do students with higher self-advocacy do better, or do students do better have higher self-advocacy? The same is true for self-regulation. So do students use more self-regulated learning strategies have better, higher achievement, or do students with higher achievement use more self-regulated learning strategies? So these causal effects, I think, are not clear. So we need more studies to examine that. And also, we need more longitudinal studies to see the longitudinal effects, so that we can enhance the self-advocacy and self-regulation in the classroom. Of course, in the end, to improve our teaching and learning. So I want to thank you again for Beijing University of Science and Technology for inviting me, giving me this opportunity to share my ideas with the audience. If you have more questions, please feel free to contact me. This is my email, and also share the references in the end. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Wang. Well, 3 meta-analysis, so it's a huge task. And also, you made a great contribution on the relation between self-efficacy beliefs and self-regulated learning strategy and language proficiency. I know that you did a lot of research on the English self-efficacy, and also I have cited many of your studies. But today our time is limited, so we cannot have any questions. Thank you again, Professor Wang. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So now I would like to invite our next host, Professor Zhou Tongquan, to chair the next session. Okay, Professor Zhou, are you here?
Yes,
Okay,
I am here. Can you hear me, everyone?
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm glad to be invited here to chair the following 2 speakers. The first keynote speaker is Professor Yang Jin. Now, first of all, let me have a brief introduction of Professor Yang Jin. Dr. Yang Jin is a professor, supervisor, as well as supervisor in the School of International Studies, Zhejiang University. She also serves as a standing director of China's Professional Committee of Psycholinguistics and the director of China's Society for Neurolinguistics. Her research interests include second language acquisition, bilingual processing, and reading disorder. To date, she has more than 20 publications in influential journals like Brain and Language, Journal of Neurolinguistics, Language Teaching and Research, or Foreign Language Teaching and Research. In addition, she has had 2 important monographs published recently. She has presided 6 academic projects, both national and provincial. All these achievements needed to her 2 important prizes. Recently, she won the first and second prize of the Philosophy and Social Sciences in Guangdong Province. Her speech for this morning is Brain and Second Language Learning. Now let's welcome Professor Yang Jin.
Okay, thank you, Professor Zhou. Can you hear me, Professor
Yes.
Zhou? Okay, nice. So you can also see my slides, right?
Yes, right.
Okay, great. Thank you, Professor Zhou, for your kind introduction. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the conference organizer and particularly Professor Zhu Jin. And it is my great honor to be here today and to give a talk among all the prominent lecturers and speakers this morning. So today I'm going to introduce our work on brain and second language learning, and from the perspectives of the neuroscience. As we all know that brain and language, they co-evolve. And as very complex adaptive systems, languages, the understanding of the language and the brains can really benefit our understanding of our past.
I didn't interrupt you, Professor Yang. Can you make your speech a little louder?
So is it getting better?
Yes.
Okay, so I just stay closer to my laptop. So that prompts me to really to explore the language learning from the brain plasticity way. So the brain plasticity, in fact, refers to the adaptive changes related to the brain functions and the structures. Some of us well know that there is a very famous study about how London taxi driver's brain can be shaped by the special experience. Their long-term memories brain region, the hippocampus, get larger as the driver's experiences increases. And my approach, my research interest include to study the brain plasticity associated with the second language learning. So in today's talk, I'm going to introduce our works in bilingualism, second language learning, and finally, I hope to provide you with an overall of the trends in our field. For anyone who studied bilingualism, I mean, these models might be very familiar for you. For example, the RHM model proposed about 13 years ago, and the BIA Plus model approached the bilingual lexical processing from the connectisms approach. And the recent proposed multilingual models also talks about how the two languages can be stored as well as accessed in the bilingual brain. But these are the cognitive models. As you can see that they all talking about whether the two lexicons can reach each other and how they get access to the concept and how the bilinguals can access the lexical and really produce it out. That's the hypothesized cognitive models based on the behavioral findings. And our exploration on this bilingual language representations started about 10 years ago. It's a long time ago. As some of you might know, in the alphabetic languages, they have the morphological markers like the ed, ing, and the singular forms. And in Chinese, we do not have the morphological markers. Like the Chinese character on the right, as you can see, 教授, okay? In Chinese, it could mean that to teach, or it could mean professor. This word could be used as a noun or verb. We have no clue, okay? You just have to base on the sentence context to tell whether it's a noun and verb. So in 2008, Alice Chen, she had carried a study and compared the early proficient bilinguals. They were Chinese, Cantonese, English proficient bilinguals. They find that when the Chinese English proficient bilinguals process English nouns and verbs, they were very similar with the native English speakers. But in our study published in 2011, we find that Chinese late English proficient bilinguals, when we process English nouns and verbs, we use the very similar neural substrates as our first language. It seems that we are using our first language and neural substance to process our second language. That might explain that why we learn English less proficient. So bilingualism used to be regarded as a category label. You either be a bilingual or not. But nowadays, the view has been replaced by the continuing stream. Like in the 2020, recently, the UBET model has proposed that bilingual experience, in fact, includes a lot of important factors, like language use, language switching, and how proficient are the two languages, as well as the emergent experiences. And based on these understandings, and we conducted a multimodal imaging approach. I mean, in the past few years, there have been studies also try to explore the L2 proficiency biomarkers in the brain. Either a brain region or brain network can tell whether one is highly proficient or low proficient in the second language. Usually, they just scan the human beings, the learner's brain structure, or they explored the brain functions. But in our study, we combine these two measures. So we have the brain, the learners, the bilingual's brain scanned. We collect the structure images. At the same time, we also collected the resting state fMRI data. That is when they were asked to just look at the fixation. We assume that there is no linguistic processing going on. And in the task-related fMRI, we asked them to either to name the pictures in the first language Chinese or in English, their second language. So by combining the data from the three different modalities, we were able to identify the right fusion drivers, which is distinguished from the left temporoparietal regions in the Western literature. This region is essential for Chinese learners to have better L2 proficiency, the learning English. And the right fusion drivers, in fact, this is an indicator of L2 learning success. in our bilinguals based on our multimodal study. So we are aware that the two languages might have overlapped and there is many manipulators. But in the meantime, the whole areas also perceive that the bilingual language need to be manipulated. The two languages were parallelly activated. So we need to inhibit the non-target language and produce the target language. Then the David Green and Jubin Abtalabi, they proposed that the language control is not a switch on and switch off region. This comprises network. In 2007, they proposed this model based on the 4 regions in the left brain. And in 2013, they revised the model and give the new name that's adaptive control model. They emphasize the importance of the language context. For example, I'm speaking in the English context, then I can also switch to Chinese. Maybe this is called a bilingual language context. But there's some situation like the dense code switching context on the right. As you can see that sometimes in China, you will see a lot of people mixing the Chinese and English or mixing Cantonese and English in one sentence. So in the different contexts, maybe this language control network need to work in parallel to complete the task. There is also a very hot topic in the bilingual control area. It's about because the control mechanism, the general control mechanisms overlaps with the language control in the bilinguals. So it is possible that the bilinguals might have cognitive control advantage. So Professor Cui Gang, he's going to talk about that in details. So I'll just skip this part. But as we are aware that we bilinguals, when we produce language, when we comprehend language, we always have a context. For example, in China, no matter in mainland China or in Hong Kong or Macau, you will see a lot of scripts. And don't forget, we have a lot of variety of dialects. Everyone speaks at least 2 different languages nowadays. So in our paper published in 2018, we probe whether the bilingual context could influence the non-linguistic, the cognitive control mechanisms in trilinguals. We find the Cantonese, Mandarin, and English trilinguals, and we find that the brain networks for the cognitive control can be shaped dynamically according to the speaking context. For example, in the Cantonese Mandarin context, okay, it's a lateralized control network, but in the Mandarin English context, this direction has changed. And it is kind of broken in the Cantonese English context because these 2 languages has seldom been mixed in their life experience. Okay, but the bilingualism studies could provide some indirect evidence on how the brain can be shaped by second language learning. In 2014, Professor Ping Li and his doctoral student has summarized what is the brain structures that showed increased volumes after linguistic training or non-linguistic training. As you can see that this shaded, the blobs indicate the language learning will increase the brain volumes in this area. So that raises a question. So if we increases our L2 proficiency, does it mean that our brain will always get big? If it is true, then we will encounter such a weird situation. Everyone has a very big head, right? So I mean, this is not reasonable. So recently, according to this new model proposed by Pliasikas in 2019, she proposed that their second language learnings can lead to structural plasticities in 3 different changes. And according to this, the one on the top, as you can see, there were multiple dimensions changes. It could be gray matter or white matter or subcortical, including the cerebellums, gray matters. And sometimes it increases at the beginning phase and later in the subcortical and white matter tract that could be a decrease. But this is just the speculations based on the bilingual studies. And in the recent years, we have witnessed enormous growth on second language learning. I mean, longitudinal tracing, the brain changes while we acquire a second language. This is some of the studies conducted in the lab-based, and this is the studies have traced the language learning, second language learning in the classroom instruction. Like our study published in 2015, this is a lab-based training. We train English native speakers to learn Chinese vocabularies within 6 weeks. And we find that the English native speakers, the successful learners, they had a green brain activation after the training, after 6 weeks. This is functional data. They have more red blobs, okay, hearing the same tones, okay. So when we put the 3 groups, we have non-learners who never undergone the training, and the less successful learners and versus the successful learners. As you can see from this figure, the successful learners, they had multiple routes, pathways between the language learning areas. And for the less successful learners, they do have some connections, but it's not always connected. While for the non-learners, is basically these nodes in the left brain are not connected. Interestingly, as you can see that the blue paths, okay, indicate their changes, the brain connectivity at the beginning. So even before the training, the successful learners, they seem to have a biological or cognitive advantage in learning a second language. Their brain areas important for second language well connected, okay, far more well connected before the training starts, okay, while the less successful learners is not ready, okay. So this is our learning paradigm. Just look at the picture and the hearing word. This is the auditory study. Then we went further. We conducted further studies, and we explored how the sound discrimination ability is associated with our tonal language learning, like Chinese. Based on our connective analysis, we find that the connection, okay, as you can see that based on the literature, we have the ventral pathway and the dorsal pathway, 2 language pathways for language processing. And in our plot on the right, as you can see, the connection between the attention center, that is ACC, and the phonologic and semantic hub, the posterior superior temporal gyrus, is essential not only for second language learning, okay, the more stronger connected these 2 areas, they have the better learning performance. They're also essential for the auditory perception skills. That's why auditory perception skills is highly related with one's Chinese learning performance. So we were able to show the brain connectivity evidence to support the behavioral findings between auditory perception and the second language learning, especially the auditory word learning. So besides the lexical learning, we also try to probe what is the brain mechanisms for grammar learning. So based on the very classic artificial grammar paradigm, study paradigm, we created an artificial grammar sequences, grammatical sequences and ungrammatical sequences. We have 2 groups of learners. One group learns the rules explicitly, the other ones learn the groups implicitly. We find that the brain connectivity between the 2 groups, although they were learning the same, presented with the same sequences, they learned it through the different pathway. Obviously, for the implicit learners, they had the primary pathway is about from the frontal to the subcortical region. While for the explicit learners, it goes mainly primary through the inferior frontal gyrus to the insular pathway. Okay, that shows that if we apply different instruction or learning instruction, teaching instruction, or the learning strategies in our second language learning, they might recruit different neural substrates, and that will definitely produce or result in the different learning outcomes. So we also studied how the working memory, that's a very essential cognitive skills related with the second language grammar learning. We find that only for the explicit learners, the phonological working memory performance can predict the learning success, but not for the implicit learning group. Okay, so as you can see that the learning bilingual lexical representation, bilingual language control, and we do have some the cues and the context, okay, which can manipulate our language processing and the language control. But meanwhile, we also notice that in the real life, when I speak, when we speak to English, we Chinese speaking to English speakers, okay, with Caucasian face, sometimes it's so difficult to really talk with them in Chinese, although they may speak very fluent Chinese. So in 2013, we had one fMRI study conducted. We asked the Chinese English bilinguals as well as the English monolinguals to just read out the word, just name the pictures, okay, within the frame Okay, but by the frame, you can see that there are different faces, either it's Asian faces or the Caucasian faces. We find that the Chinese English bilinguals, they were largely benefited when they were presented with the Asian face speaking Chinese. But when the face is incongruent with the language, like seeing Caucasian face while speaking Chinese, their reaction times will become much more slower and they made more errors. Okay, and there was of some brain regions so sensitivity to that congruent or incongruent conditions. So recently we trained the participants. Okay, we have 3 different conditions. Not always we have the congruent or incongruent condition. So in one situation, that's the Chinese face, the Asian face always associated with English speaking English. While in another situation, that's most probably the face and the language as congruent. In the baseline conditions, there is no face cues, just the picture naming, okay, without any cues. So we find that there are 2 language control mechanisms. One is reactive, the other one is proactive. Across the 3 changing contexts, the proactive controls seem to remain very stable, while it was the reactive language control really adapts to the changing facial context. Okay, which means that the relationship, the link between the context and the lexical productions, in fact, could be shaped, okay, and it could be learned. This is a very consistent with previous studies on the first language acquisition. Okay, Patricia Koo has numerous studies suggesting that the live interactions between the babies and the main caregivers, the linguistic information providers, is essential for them to learn second language. If you let the baby just watch the TV, they might not learn as well as when they were interacts with a teacher. While in this pandemic era, this online education is becoming more and more popular anyway. So we try to find out whether there are some individual differences and related with online learning, especially we care about the education inequality, okay, across different individuals. So we presented the participants in lectures, video lectures, either without no instructor, with the picture of the instructor, or with instructor like I'm giving a conference with my camera on. Okay, so then ask them a question to see whether the learning performance would be influenced by the presence of the instructor. We find that the working memory capacity really matters. For the high working memory group, they do not care about the instructor's presence, but the low working memory groups, okay, if there is no instructor's hints or clues, they definitely will achieve low in the online learning. But for if you have the instructor image, or especially the video, their learning performance will largely be being facilitated. So which means that we as teachers, as instructors, we definitely need to turn on our cameras when we are giving the video talks. So meanwhile, we also realize that if we learned L2 in classroom settings, so compare with English native speakers, when they retrieve the English nouns and verbs, they do have the sensory motor areas connected with the semantic system, but not for us, not for our second language learners, even for highly proficient bilinguals, Chinese English proficient bilinguals, we only access the semantic information. We do not connect the sensory motor information as in our R1 or as the R1 English speakers. So which means that we should definitely increase our social cues when we want to have the good outcomes of second language learning and make it as close as first language. So according to Li and Zhen in 2020, they proposed this L2 social learning theory. They said that the learning through the real life or simulated real life environment, and in which the learners can interact with objects and peoples. And this sensory information will embedded with the new vocabularies. And that will definitely achieve the better learning outcomes or the embodied communication. So there is many ways that we can do that, not only just to have the real life interactions and teaching in the classroom, more interaction between the teachers and the students. We can also, if we have to give the online lectures, online talks, we can do more social context-based learning in terms of second language learning. I know that a lot of teams are working on to shown that virtual reality is really a good tool for students to enhance the students' social learning of the second language. Like you see that you're walking around in the kitchen and you open the microwave and you took out the dish course and to learn a vocabulary. That is what is going on, and some of the studies have already been published. So in the end, as we can say that second language learning and in the social context definitely is the way to go. And we can use modern technologies like virtual reality. We can use like avenues to see how the people communicate and how the teacher and the students' brain signals can be coherent or incoherent. Or we can see what is going on in the classroom with the students' brain activities connected. So that is my talk today. And finally, I would really show my gratitude to the team at Professor Pingley's lab. And this is my group. And if you have any questions and I don't have time to address, just to shoot me an email. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Yang Jin. Yeah, I think your speech is very informative. Also, your speech is inspiring and thought-provoking. I think there are some minutes left here. I'm wondering the audience online have any questions for Professor Yang Jin? Yeah. Okay, maybe it's not so convenient for us to, in a face-to-face way. Now, in fact, the second language learning is a frequent topic for us, particularly for those young people in this area. And I suppose most young people are the so-called second language learners. I mean, is that correct, Professor
Yes.
Yang? Yeah.
Yes, sure.
So,
yeah, but late learners.
Yeah, late learners, right. So it's very important to study the relationship between how second language is acquired and processed in our brain. Yeah. In general, we know language learning is composed of 3 components: sounds, words, and grammar. Comparatively, this the words and grammar learning are more complicated. Yeah, what Professor Yang Jin talked just now focus on the 2 aspects. Yeah, particularly from the perspective, the cognitive neurology. Yeah, I'm much inspired by what she talked about. Particularly, I'm interested in the so-called biological marker related to second language learning, second language proficiency, and also the collectivity paths related to different languages. Yeah, I think all this may propose of a further understanding of how language learning, how second language is acquired and processed. And in the meanwhile, we can use these new findings from the neurological perspective to acquire language more efficiently. Yeah. Thank you, Professor Yang.
Thank you, Professor Zhao. Thank you.
Now it's time for the second key speaker, Cui Gan. Now, at first, I briefly introduce Professor Cui Gan. Dr. Cui Gan is a tenured professor in the Department of Foreign Language and Literatures at Tsinghua University, doctoral supervisor, director of the Center for the Study of Language and Psychology, head of the Language, Psychology, and Cognition discipline. He is also the chairman of Language, Cognition, and Intelligence Department Committee of the Chinese Language Modernization Society. His research areas include foreign language teaching, psycholinguistics, and neurolinguistics. He has presided over and participated in many research projects funded by humanities and social sciences of the Ministry of Education and the National Social Science Foundation. His major accomplishments are 11 monographs published, 21 kinds of textbooks, including more than 50 books. As chief editor or deputy chief editor in their compilation, more than 100 papers in important academic journals at home and abroad, 4 books translated from Chinese to English, and 4 dictionaries edited, among which the representative works include Speech Disorders of Chinese Physics, Language Studies on Aphasia, English Teaching Theory and Practice, 16 lectures on English teaching, readings in modern linguistics, 19 years since Social, Volume 1 and 2. Studies on English teaching in China, neurolinguistics, a study of the individual differences of Chinese EFL learners from the perspective of dynamic system theories. Psychological and neurological theories of foreign language learning. His speech today is bilingual advantage or disadvantage. Now let's welcome Professor Cui Gang. Can you hear me, Professor Cui?
来，我共享一下屏幕。
Okay.
这是电脑反应有点慢。
没关系的。
对不起啊，稍等，越着急越那个什么，这个机器，
时间够的，您不着急。
这个电脑听了一上午报告了，它比较热了。
是的。
哎，真是关键时刻。刚才还好好的，哎呀，这没有。各位同事啊，那个我用汉语讲吧，这样的话呢，大家已经听了一上午了，这个主要是因为英语讲的，比较辛苦啊，到最后一个了，这个用汉语讲，大家都稍微的放松一点啊。那个我今天汇报的题目呢是关于这个双语优势还是双语劣势。这个呢和刚才杨静教授讲的这个题目呢有着密切的关系啊。其实呢，这个关于这个题目，它是来自于这么一个很简单的，但是呢也是一个很重要的一个问题，就是说呢，我们一个人除了母语之外，如果说我们再去学习二语，或者说我们叫做外语之后，我们就成为一个双语者。那么这个双语能给我们带来什么？那么很明显的来说，我们通过学习一种语言，我们具备了这种语言的能力，我们就可以有机会和来自于不同的文化背景的人进行交流，也会有更多的就业的机会。那么也就意味着说，可能会有更好的工作岗位，会有更好的薪水啊，也可以有更多的渠道去获得新的知识、新的信息等等等等，这一些都是很明显的一些这个给我们带来的好处。但是呢，如果我们仔细想一想，从深层次的角度来想，学习一种外语之后，它给我们的认知能够带来什么？ 甚至于说它能够给我们的神经系统，刚才其实杨老师也谈到，就是说这个二语学习和这个大脑之间的关系，它能给我们的神经系统来带来什么？那么在这样的问题之下呢，它有一个基本的一个逻辑，这个逻辑呢就是基于所谓的并行激活，这是我们呢过去最近这10-20年关于双语认知领域所形成的一个文献当中说呢，这是一个过去这几十年关于双语认知领域的一个重大的发现之一啊。其实他把它列在第一位，就是所谓的什么呢？并行激活。也就是说，我们作为一个双语者，比方说我们都是英汉双语者，当我们在讲英语的时候也好，还是在讲汉语的时候也好，另外一种语言都同时是被激活的。那么这也就意味着说呢，我们的认知系统要一直不断的在管理着这两种语言。当我们在讲汉语的时候，那么英语的有关的词也好，有关的这个句子结构也好，它也会被同时激活的。那么在这么一种情况之下呢，就意味着说，我们需要不断的对这两种语言之间进行一个监控，进行一个管理，是吧？把一些无关的信息给它抑制下去，然后呢，把我们主要的精力放在我们要达成的这个目标上面。那么这样的话呢，就有可能给我们带来两种效果。哪两种结果呢？一种结果就是说，这个因为我们要不停的进行对这两种语言进行管理，那么这样的话呢，这种不断的进行管理，实际上呢，就是对我们认知系统的一种训练。那么这种长期的训练，甚至于说当我们学了语言之后，如果说一个儿童从小他就学外语，他就变成了一个双语者的话，那一辈子他都要进行这种管理。那么这种长期的管理呢，它可能会强化我们的认知能力。那么也就是说呢，这样的话呢，就会给我们带来所谓的双语优势。也就是说，双语者和单语者相比，他的认知能力要优于单语者。另外一个呢，这种优势也有可能会带来大脑结构的这种优化，这是第一种可能。第二种可能呢，就是说你在管理的时候，实际上呢，另外你在使用一种语言的时候，另外一种语言也被激活了。那么被激活了之后呢，在某种意义上来说，它就意味着是我们认知过程的一种干扰。而且呢，一方面它对我们的认知过程造成干扰，另一方面呢，它还可以增加我们的认知的负担，尤其是增加我们工作记忆的负担。刚才杨老师也谈到工作记忆，说工作记忆容量低的人，尤其对于工作记忆容量低的人来说，他激活更多的信息之后，那么他加工处理起来以后，他的负担会更大，他处理的效率会更低。那么这样的话呢，很可能就会影响到他的认知能力。那么按照这样的一种逻辑的话呢，双语者的认知能力要低于单语者。这就是我们说的目前我们这个题目所谓的这两个观点，就是说一个是双语优势，一个是双语劣势。那么对于这个关于双语优势和双语劣势呢，实际上它已经经历了到现在为止整整是100年的时间。我们简要的把这100年的研究做一个简短的回顾。做这个回顾呢，我们可以把这100年的研究给它分为3个阶段。第一个阶段就是从人们关注双语对于认知的影响开始，也就是呢上个世纪的20年代最早的2篇文章就是这个 Smith 这两位学者，他们呢当时是在这个英国 心理学期刊上面发表的，实际上呢是就在这个期刊上面呢，这个 British Journal of Psychology， 在这个期刊上面呢，分别是一个13，一个14，接续发表的。那么在这个阶段，人们主流的观点就是双语劣势，认为这个双语会对儿童的认知的发展产生负面的影响。这里我们引述了一句话直接引用的这个 good enough 这个名字很好记，就是翻译成汉语就是刚刚好他说的一句话说，在家里面使用外语是导致智力低下的一个主要的因素之一。所以说呢，在那个阶段是这么个样子。那么到了第二个阶段，就是从上个世纪的60年代到90年代左右。那么在这个阶段当中呢，其中一个转折点就是说，从这个双语劣势转为双语优势的观点，一个转折点就是这2位学者的研究。他们当时呢是以这个加拿大的这个双语的儿童来研究对象做的研究。那么这个研究呢发现说，实际上双语的儿童在认知能力上要优于单语儿童。那么从此以后呢，这个作为一个转折点式的里程碑式的这个研究就引起了人们广泛的注意，而且呢研究的方法、研究的内容都得到了极大的扩充。为什么说研究的内容得到了极大的扩充呢？因为在第一个阶段研究的时候，就是说在这个阶段研究的时候，人们研究的关注点主要是放在双语对于儿童认知发展的影响上面。那么在60年代到90年代开始，这个时候呢，经过这一个变化以后，人们呢关注的对象不仅仅关注儿童，而且关注青少年，关注成年人，关注老年人等等这一些另外一个呢，最重要的一个就是主流的观点发生了变化。那就是什么呢？大量的研究表明说，双语能够带来认知的优势，这个时候就是双语优势的阶段。那么进入到上个世纪末到2000年左右这个阶段开始呢，人们对于过去30年当中这种主流的双语优势的观点，有的学者就开始提出来了疑问，提出来了质疑，而且呢也有很多不支持双语优势的发现陆续的发表出来。在这个阶段呢，就进入了所谓的双语优势之争的阶段。那么这个争论一直持续到现在这也是我们为什么今天在这个会上呢，我给大家汇报这个问题谈一些想法，也是主要的这个原因。那么好了，这是我们对这100年做的一个简要的一个综述。现在呢，我就给大家汇报一下呢，就是说目前关于双语对于认知的研究，它的主要的领域，第一个呢，当然就是对于认知的影响，对认知本身的影响，其中呢包括执行功能，而且呢执行功能是双语优势研究领域当中最集中的，也就是说呢相关的研究最多的一个领域。那么我们所谓的这个执行功能就指的是什么呢？就是说我们人对于我们整个认知活动的控制与管理，它的基本的认知活动包括注意力的控制，包括认知的抑制，包括冲突的解决，还有的学者呢把工作记忆和认知的灵活性也包括在中央执行功能之内，这是一个领域。那么另外一个领域就是关于创新思维创新思维呢主要包括发散思维和聚合思维这 这2种类型啊。那么现在呢，研究的重点主要是放在发散思维上面。我看了一下大量的文献，这个主要是呢研究这个发散思维的，这是创新思维方面。还有一个呢，就是关于我们的所谓的心理理论。其实呢，从汉语的意思来说，心理理论其实心理理论不是一个理论，它是一种能力，它是一个什么呢？就是我们去认识自身以及他人心理状况的这种能力啊。再一个，还有一个重要的研究领域，就是关于什么呢？双语和人们老年人这个这个认知能力退化的关系的研究啊。这个呢也是一个非常重要的一个领域，而且呢，现在大量的研究发现说呢，就是基本上达成的一个基本的一个结论，就是说呢，双语啊，这个双语能够让这个老年痴呆的年龄延缓5到7年啊，5到7年。甚至呢，这是研究的领域涵盖了这一些。另外一个呢，它也涉及到关于这个神经基础的问题。刚才杨静老师也谈到了这个中央执行的，你比方说这个其中大家关注最多的一位，这个在双语认知领域关注最多的一个就是这个前扣带回皮层啊。因为什么呢？现在发现说呢，这个人的执行功能和这个大脑的额叶以及相关的这个区域直接关系。具体来讲，就是呢，其中呢前扣带回皮层呢在里面起到了很大的作用。当然还有其他。另外一个呢，进行这些神经基础的研究，它主要的目的就是为了解释为什么会产生双语优势还是双语的劣势啊。另外一个领域呢，就是关于双语对于语言加工以及语言学习的影响。那么现在呢，有意思的问题在哪呢？就是说很多研究发现说，基本的研究发现说，就是说双语对于人的认知能力似乎影响是正面的啊，好多研究这样发现。但是呢，对于语言能力，你打个比方说，我们双语者，我们的对于汉语能力的影响，现在大量的研究发现说呢，双语者的语言能力要低于单语者。另外呢，语言的加工能力也要低于单语者啊。但是呢，在学习方面，你比方说我要学了2种语言，我再学习另外一种语言，但是那个呢可能是正面的效应。这是刚才我都是讲的关于这个所谓的优势。其实呢，我刚才说了，现在我们这个阶段是处在双语优势之争的阶段。那么这个争论原因在哪里？就在于说呢，有大量的研究证明有双语优势，与此同时也有大量的研究证明说没有优势，甚至于还有劣势。这是目前的现状啊。那么为什么会产生这样的争论呢？我个人的看法，其实呢，它和这个争论啊是一个非常正常的现象。为什么呢？因为啊，双语再加认知这2个概念都是非常非常复杂的啊。你举个例子说，我们说双语的问题，这个双语的类型实在是太多了，对吧？你这个在这本书里面，这个 Gass 和 Selink 他们在2020年的那个《二语习得引论》这本书 Introduction to Second Language Acquisition 这本书里面，它区分了37种，根据这个年龄啊，根据这个语言的水平啊，以及根据学习的方式啊等等其他的因素，它区分了37种不同类型的这种双语，是吧？那个双语的类型实在太多。你比方说，就像我们国内实际上按理说比较简单的，为什么我们主要的是外语学习？那外语学习都，而且呢，学习的方式绝大多数都是通过学校学习的。但是即使这样，也是有非常大的区别。为什么呢？你开始学习的年龄是什么时间？你的家庭环境怎么样？你达到了一个什么样的水平？ 等等等等，这一些都会导致这个双语的问题非常的复杂。这是第一点。第二点呢，就是关于这个认知，也是这个人的认知，所谓的认知，它是一个非常抽象的一个问题，是吧？它又不像我们胳膊腿一样拿过来，我就直接可以量一量它有多粗多长。所以说呢，我们现在去测量人的认知能力，测量人的认知能力，主要的就是通过这种间接的手段。你比方说，我们现在对于执行功能有这样的这种多维这个多维变换卡片这个分类，这都是给小孩子的西蒙任务stroke 任务等等这一些，用来测量它的这个执行功能。还有测量那个创新思维的，创新思维现在用的最多的是那个 Torrance 那个叫翻译成汉语叫托兰斯这个创新思维测试，用的最多是这个。但是呢，也有很多学者用其他的这种测试的方式。你比方说用给小孩子的我看有一个研究，他用什么呢？就是说用一个卡通的画，上面有一个小猫，那个小猫旁边呢放着一个架子，架子上面呢放着一顶帽子，很高，这个小猫够不着。然后呢，在这个小猫的旁边给它放一个凳子，放一把椅子，再给它放一个棍子，然后让这个受试说你能不能想出办法来想出办法来让小猫够到这个帽子，就类似于这样。这些呢但是这些测试都是一些间接的测试。另外一个呢，这个间接的测试呢，现在很多研究就是好多用做这个 meta analysis 做这个原分析的这些文献都表明说呢，你用不同的测量方式得出的结论往往是不一样，它会影响到你的这个研究的结论。这是这个问题的复杂性，是吧？另外还有一个呢，就是研究方法。因为上面这两个这个双语认知两个很复杂，两个复杂的问题纠结在一起。我们从数学上那个组合的概念来说，你想一想得有多少种组合，那么这样的组合就这种复杂性，它自然就会影响到我们的研究方法。第一就是关于这个变量的控制，是吧？按理说我们从因变量、自变量，我们给它控制起来，产生一种因果关系。但是呢，其他很多相关的因素很难控制住，因为人的认知能力，它不仅仅受到双语，它还受到好多其他因素。你比方说，一个人的这种social economic 社会经济地位，他的背景，他的这个社会地位，他的家庭环境等等，这一些都会影响到。所以说呢，控制起变量来非常的难。所以说现在目前大家可以如果阅读文献，你就会发现说，在这些争论当中，相互的否定对方的结论的时候，其中首先攻击的对象就是说你的研究方法有问题，你的受试的选择有问题。因为呢，你受试的选择没有非常好的控制到这个变量，这就和这个受试的选择。另外一个还有一个就是测量方式，你所采用的测量工具也是一个。另外还有一个呢，数据的分析。那个数据的分析也直接会影响到这个它最终的结果还有一个重要的问题是什么呢？就是出版的偏见。所谓出版的偏见有两个方面这也是我们在有关领域当中一个值得注意的问题，就是什么呢？第一个，对于研究者本人来说，如果他的研究的结果和他的预期不一致的时候，更多的研究者就怀疑自己的研究成果，就不愿意，就是他把它公开发表的可能性就很小。你只要是得出来说预期和这个主流的观点一致的话，那可能就更容易发表出来。这是对于这个研究者本人来说。对于呢这个一个期刊的这种编辑以及审稿人来说也是这个样。 最后呢，人们研究就发现说，在某一个时期，之所以那种观点占主流，就是因为说呢，很多的和这个主流观点不一致的研究没有被公之于众。所以说呢，这个争论的这个原因非常多的，但是有点呢，这个问题啊，本身就来自于说这个问题是非常复杂。那么在这么一种情况之下，我们下一步应该怎么办？首先第一个，我们应该说，关于双语优势这个研究是一个非常重要的研究领域。也就是说呀，关于双语对于认知的研究、认知影响的研究是一个非常重要的研究领域。第一个就是说，我们现在这个世界上，这个不是世界上，就咱们中国来说，双语的人是越来越多。为什么呢？外语学习的普及，是吧？你过去从80年代开始，我们到现在几乎每个人都双语了。为什么呢？尤其是我们现在50岁年龄50岁以下的人，几乎人人都是双语，因为我们义务教育就把英语作为必修课，是吧？那么这样的话呢，这个数量非常的大。那么它的理论的一个意义就在于说呢，我这是引用了一个论文的一个题目，就是呢，一个人他具备2种语言，双语的研究是我们认识人的语言和认知以及大脑之间关系的一个重要的工具，或者说是一个非常重要的窗口。通过双语认知的研究，可以呢进一步的加深我们对于语言和认知以及大脑之间关系的认识。这是它的理论意义。最重要的是什么呢？在于它的实践意义。实践意义就在于大案的背景。现在呢，就说我们在国际上有一个基本的因为呢，我们现在进入脑科学的时代，脑时代，所以说呀，很多人就主张说呢，我们应该从原来的身体健康要到脑健康来发展，这个理念，健康的理念要发展。那么和脑健康有关的以及认知健康有关的这个 cognitive fitness 认知健康有关的，像这些有2个重要的概念，一个是大脑储备，还有一个是认知储备。所谓的大脑储备就指的是什么呢？我们的大脑结构对于认知能力的支撑的能力，就是大脑的结构对于认知的支撑能力，是吧？你不同的大脑结构，人具备不同大脑结构的人，他的认知能力就不一样。这是大脑储备。所谓认知储备指的是什么呢？就是说你一个人的认知能力，你的认知的这种过程，对于某些有大脑损伤的这些患者，对于这个大脑损伤的弥补能力。为什么这样讲呢？因为现在发现说，同样是有大脑的损伤，它的部位、它的严重程度都一样，但是有一点，它表现出来的症状差别很大。为什么呢？其中一个重要的原因就是因为它的认知储备不一样。另外，对于儿童来说，他的认知发展；对于成年人来说，他的大脑储备、他的认知储备，这样的话呢，为他将来以后老年的生活奠定一个好的基础。还有一个就是我们老年人，现在我们进入老年社会，是吧？这些人他的老年痴呆也好，他的语言能力的退化也好，各个方面这些呢都和他有非常大的关系。另外还有一个呢，就是说他为我们语言政策的制定提供一个基本的理论依据，是吧？也就是说，你比方说我们现在都学外语，到底这个外语我们应该什么时候学，应该学到什么程度？为什么呢？你打个比方说，有的研究就发现说，你要想获得这种认知优势或者双语优势，你的语言水平必须要达到一定的程度，也就是说呢，要超越一个 threshold level， 要超越这个阈值。如果说呢，你要低于这个门槛的话，它会影响你的认知能力。那这问题来了，你如果说我们现在外语教学要是搞不好，很多人那个英语学了个半瓶醋，你最后 对他的认知会产生什么样的影响呢？学得好的可能有带来好这个优势，那不好的那可能带来劣势，诸如此类的这一些呢，都值得我们去进行研究啊。所以说呢，我在这里呢就是说，我们这是一个非常重要的研究领域。我想利用这个机会呢，提醒我们在座的，尤其是年轻的学者，我们呢能够关注这一点。一个呢就是关注一下我们中国的这种不同类型的双语类型，但是有一点呢，我个人认为说，总的来说，我们中国的双语类型要比国外的双语类型要好得多。为什么呢？类型要少一些。另外一个要采取一个更加全面动态的观点啊，因为时间关系呢，我这个就不展开讲了啊。还有一个，请大家特别关注，第一，因为我们是外语学习者，另外呢，关注儿童的发展，尤其是把儿童的二语的学习以及母语的习得啊，这些呢，以及他的认知的发展、大脑的发育，把这些呢综合起来，作为一个整体来对待，去研究他们之间的关系。刚才李玉明老师也讲说，关于那个母语习得的问题，其实呢，我们母语习得现在呢，主要就是光放在母语习得本身，它语言的变化，哪个结构怎么习得，什么时候习得的。我希望更多的关注什么呢？就是说这个语言的变化发展和认知发展和大脑发育之间，它们是一种什么的关系？另外，我们也更加的关注这个老年人。你比方说，我们现在研究双语的老年人和单语的老年人，他们之间语言能力的差异等等这一些。那么这一些呢，对于我们帮助老年人他们以后的这种，他们能够在这种晚年的时候能够有一个更加健康的生活，有高的生活质量，能够给他们通过我们语言的角度给他们提供切实的帮助。我想这个呢，是我们一个这个语言学研究者在一个新时代的这么一个义不容辞的这么一种责任。好，因为时间关系呢，我给大家的汇报就到这里，谢谢大家啊，欢迎交流，有不对的地方，请大家批评指正，谢谢。
好，谢谢崔刚教授给我们做的这个很深入、很深刻的一个发言啊，就是这个双语双语现象，大家都很清楚，都很了解这种现象，但是对它优势、劣势及其相关的争议，就说我们可能了解的不是那么清楚啊。通过那个崔教授的介绍呢，我们对这些有关的这些方面，尤其是有关的真正有关的神经机制，有关的他的认知方面的一些问题，有了一个比较宏观的一个了解啊。其实，在我看来，双语不只是两种语言，可能我们国家就是我记得邢屁老师他们原来主导的和深圳和两岸三地还经常开一个会议，那就是叫双语双方言。可能双方言也是不是在至少从认知神经科学这个角度，我们这方面的研究还很少。我想以后也可以是不是我们中国的学者也可以在这方面去做一些工作啊？我想，因为崔刚老师是这个领域做的，就是说最早的这个领头人之一，也可以给我们多一些这方面的一些指导。好，因为时间到了啊，下面我不知道是我们直接结束上午的会议，还是任教授，你是主持，还有没有什么要说的？
哎，好，谢谢童全教授。今天上午呢，各位专家已经讲完了，大家很辛苦。上午的会议按照日程已经结束。好，同学们，我们可以吃饭了。下午准时按照规定的时间，来会议现场。好，谢谢大家。
好，
好。同学们记住，在现场看看，放个饭桌。咱们两个人。
and teachers. There are over 70 million users, covering thousands of universities and schools all over China.